lämnar jag över ord och bild till Eva från SOM.
Hi, this seminar will be held in English because I have 3 distinguished guests from our international network, and they're going to help me with this manifest talk about international independence and international independence. So I'm honored to have and introduce to you Roger Dorresteijn, General Manager of Epitaph Records, Europe.
Okay.
We have Noemí Planas, General Manager of WIN, World Independent Network, and IMPALA's own Chief Lady Helen Smith. Warm welcome. And where are you joining us from today? Helen, where are you?
Hi, I'm joining from Brussels. That's where IMPALA is based. We're all still on compulsory work from home due to the pandemic for the moment. So that explains the strange background.
And Roger.
Hi, Eva. I'm in my office, Amsterdam. One of the few. There's hardly anyone in offices over here still, same as Brussels. It's going to change hopefully soon, but I have a big room to myself, based in Amsterdam since we started in Europe back in '94. So that is that's still our hub.
Nice. And Noemí, where are you based?
Hi, Eva, and hi everybody. I'm joining from WIN office in Madrid. You're welcome, all of you, and if you want to ever come down and visit us. And thank you for inviting me to be part of these talks. It's great to be among good friends and have this opportunity to chat about the role of independence.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Like I mentioned in the panel before, we had with the Swedish Business Organization, the Manifest Talks is about inspiration, education, and discussion about current topics in the music industry. And talking about inspiration, I want to start by putting the spotlight on Roger from Epitaph Records. Epitaph Records was founded by Bad Religion's guitar player, Brett Gurewitz, right?
That's correct.
In LA. And you're head of the European office, but this is a company that have existed for 40 years. And it would be so interesting to hear the story from the start to today, or at least since you started.
Well, I can go a little bit back to before I started with, Brett Gurewitz being a band member, literally just selling his 7 inches and later on LPs from the back of his car. That was the 80s, like playing gigs, West Coast. That was the DIY scene. You're running around and you were trying to distribute your records, and at some point you think, I'll do it myself. And that's how it started. He signed a bunch of bands which were all his friends, and that is basically the luck of your surroundings. Yeah, he was surrounded by a lot of great bands which were very talented and happen to have a great future. So bands like Rancid, NoFX, Pennywise, Offspring, they were all there from the start. They were basically bands that were opening up for Bad Religion. They were hanging out, and that's how it all grew. So the American operation started in the 80s, stopped a little bit, and then we started. But it all changed with, if most of you remember, the mid-90s, where, Green Day, Offspring exploded. Like, there was a new genre coming over, from the US to Europe, and it was massive. And we were basically trying to ship CDs from America to Europe, which was impossible. It was millions. Like, it was just, an unstoppable boats full of CDs. And at that moment, they realized they needed something in Europe to manufacture here. to market, to sell, to do everything that we're doing from the LA office, also in Europe, because it was such a big market. And that's how Amsterdam came in the picture. Basically, Amsterdam is a nice place for bands to hang out, a favorite place. So if your boss is a label, is in a band, it's an obvious choice. For a lot of people, it isn't, because it's a small market. It's not in London. You know, it's not in the big metropolitan areas. It's basically a very central point where you can trade very well and ship and travel. Like, it's a great hub to be based. We never had the ambition to open up tons of offices. We once had a little tiny London thing going on for a little while. That didn't really work. Went back to our base. So we've never changed the structure of working out of one place. And that worked, you know, like that Offspring Rancid wave we managed to do from here. We're making our own stock here. We have teams all over Europe working for us, coordinated from one place, which is Amsterdam. And you know, the label changed a lot. We'll get to that later, but it's still the same kind of operation, and it's never grown out of proportion or you know, had the drive to take over everything. We stayed close to what we were good at, and I think that's kind of, you know, what makes us successful in that way.
Is it apart from the choice of city, as you mentioned, are there any other ways that that the owner is an artist himself? Is that significant for the label's profile, would you say?
That we're based in Amsterdam? Not really. It was easy to get people from abroad to work for us and work out of Amsterdam. So in that way, it was also like a very easy international thing. Language is important. The fact that a lot of people speak English here, was a couple of languages. Yeah, that's it didn't really set the Dutch base wasn't really an influence on what we did, who we signed, or how we managed our artists. I mean, it meant like going to London sometimes every week, or you know, traveling around a lot and being everywhere. But the basic thought is that if you have great people working in a country, if you're create a good team there that understands what you're doing and are willing to fight for you, and you set up great campaigns, you can do that just by listening to what's really happening and what they're saying in local markets. That's what we're trained to do. Like if you go to Paris and you tell them what to do, you'll fail. Just to mention Paris, but it's really important if you want to work internationally from one place to have that ability to adjust and be you know, creative and listen to the market where you're in. And that's something we've always done, you know, regardless of the genre and everything else, finding great people.
And the difference in, I mean, when you came into the company, how would you describe the different from your perspective, running a label of your size in 96, I think, when you started in 94, and today? What's the biggest change?
Oh, we used to have a fax machine back in the day with orders flying in. You know, imagine what happens if you have a big record and then you run out of paper very quickly. It's almost like talking about the Stone Age, like what we were doing in terms of tech and things that we had. It was just a completely different world. I feel like 100 years old when I look back at it, but I'm not. But it's really developed into you know, also the culture of the company is that technology is very important. So systems are very important. So we're always a little bit ahead of the game in terms of things that make our work easier, communicate easier, and have transparency about data and knowing where you are. I remember when we started, we had a system, very simple system, but we knew what we were spending on records, which was like in the mid-90s was kind of unique. No one really knew what was going on. No one really kept track of what they were just, you know, throwing around money. It was like it was a host, like people were making lots of money, and it was very hard to keep track of what you were actually doing. And we had like a system of really allocating. It sounds very basic, but it was pretty rare. Allocating budgets and focusing on certain acts in certain territories and knowing what was going on in the market. So we also had a system that we were in touch with retail all over Europe directly from one office. I don't know if any of you in the group was in retail in that period. We had a call team in national languages calling up stores, not to sell anything direct, but to give them posters and information and all that kind of stuff. A very American way of doing things, which was completely unheard of over here, because we kind of owned these relationships. You had like a network of punk rock stores. You know, there were many of them back in the day in Scandinavia. And we would call them up and support them and sell and get them information and all the rest of it. So that's like, if you talk about independence, keeping control of your relationships was hugely important, and still is. You know, like if you talk now about going to the time now where you deal with all the DSPs, all these different offices everywhere. If you give that away as a label, that is a loss. You know, you should try to stay close to that process as much as you can and own those relationships yourself. So if you switch and you go somewhere else, you take that with you and you have these relationships. That's kind of what we did back in the mid 90s, and we're still trying to do now, but it's a completely different environment, obviously.
That's a great point. So would you, and it sounds like it's part of the secret behind your success too, that you were in fact in control of the costs and both the network and the money behind the production. But would you still describe Epitaph as a punk label today?
Yeah, the budget discussion doesn't sound very punk at all, I know that, but in a way it is, because you kind of make your own choices and you have your own focuses, and you can create things yourself, and you stay independent in that way. I mean, you know, it's a bit of a joke within the company. There's two questions that always travel with me during my career, which is Epitaph still punk? And the other one is, when is the next Tom Waits record coming out? Those are the two main topics that I always. One of them I can answer. You know, punk for me is like, you know, when I started. When Offspring and Green Day exploded, you know, success was considered very unpunk. You were not allowed to have success. You know, we were sellouts. We got cards sent from different punk groups, saying how much they hated us and wanted to destroy Epitaph. That was the culture at the time, and that was just like unheard. Like the commercial, you know, making it a commercial thing, and basically being successful, being in the charts, was not done. That has changed, but the debate still goes on. You know, like we are putting out music in all kinds of genres. You know, we've created another label called Anti Records, which we think are all punk rockers in their own way. But some people think that punk rock is still mohawks and distorted guitars. Well, you know, I always go back to either Patti Smith or Joe Strummer. It is about freedom and about attitude. So if you choose what you're doing on your own terms, and you're really in control of that, that's what I consider punk rock. So yeah, you know,
maybe that is also the description of independence.
True, absolutely, yeah, and your own terms, and that's really important. Like if you don't like it, you go elsewhere, do something else. You have to be in control. And we only sign artists that know what they want. We're not very good in signing artists that we need to teach how to dance on the table. We don't. You know, we're not like that. There's mostly touring acts. They have a vision. They know what they want. And if they need help and they don't know what they want for a certain time, we'll try to advise them and help them. But that control is extremely important. You know, the most punk rock people I've worked with were people from the hills of Mississippi. They were on a label called Fat Possum. They're no longer with us. They're R.L. Burnside, T-Model Ford. These were the most punk people I've ever met in my life. They were like nearly 80 years old by the time I met them, and they were completely free. Their attitude was the strongest you can. They could talk and drink anyone under the table, and they were, for me, the essence of punk rock.
Yeah, cool. Well, Epitaph has a long history with Sweden, where we are, and I know you from your work with our legendary band Melancholy. But what would you say are just giving the international perspective, what is the biggest challenge and the important factors when you are, as a label, are based in one country and you sign a band from another country, want to bring it out in the world?
Well, from where we stand, you know, if you talk about, in this specific case, Burning Heart Records, I listened to Burning Heart Records before I started working for Epitaph, so that's even longer ago. Not that long ago, because they didn't start until 92, 93, I think. Anyway, I was listening to those records. No one was had any second thoughts on the fact that they were from Sweden, because they were so bloody good.
Mm.
They were just better, and that is, for us, it's important. If you are in a band like that and you're just your competition is the world, that's the real reason to be on an international label. You are just trying to be the best band there is in that genre, and they happen to come from a certain area in Sweden. Like, it was amazing what happened there. It was unheard of. It was like Orange County, but then in Europe. It was one band after the other, and in the scene, no one was like, "Oh no, that's some Swedish band. We don't, not the real thing." They were just better. And I remember, like, when the Hives broke in the UK, people thought they were from the UK. They claimed they were so good that they instantly claimed their nationality over there. And that happened with Millencolin too. You can take them to Australia and put them next to the best punk rock bands in anywhere in the world, and they would outplay them. So if there's a criteria for signing local bands, just be the best you can be in your own genre, and then you add something instantly. It sounds simple, but it's not. And I think that Swedish operation was unbelievable. It was really like by utter respect to the people who started, Peter and Seika and Mada, all these people that we work with, they had incredible ears. Not only for Swedish bands, they also that office also started with Parkway Drive, which is now one of our biggest bands on Epitaph. In the metalcore scene. They are like the highest level. They're and they picked them right in the beginning. So my full respect to what happened in Örebro in that office. It was unbelievable.
Indeed. But apart from your busy job as a general manager for Epitaph Europe, you also invest a lot of time in the European Trade Association for Independence, IMPALA, and were one of the people behind the starting of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, for example. What is the most important experience that you bring from that job, and why do you think it is important?
Well, I don't spend enough time in Impala to, I feel like I could do way more, but it's very hard to be all over the place sometimes because you have to run a company. It's very hands-on, but I wish there was more time for that. But so I kind of, that subject is very close to my heart, and it's something that is personally has been motivating me for quite a while. I think I was in conversation recently with one of my artists, Curtis Harding, who was making video for something that happened during the George Floyd murders and video, and he wanted to make a statement with that. And we were talking about Nina Simone, who talks about how it's the artist's duty to reflect the times. Now, that is the core for what I see we should be doing as well. Like, that is, if artists see it as a duty to reflect the times, we as a label, as a representative of artists, should do the same thing, and it's our duty to be part of that and to make change. Like, this industry doesn't have a very good image at all. We've been exploiting artists for way too long. So anything that is going towards changing that structure, which in the last 2 years has been accelerating through the protests and the whole movement that was already there but took off, and we have to change in that respect as well. And that's why that subject of diversity and inclusion I can't let go. It's my duty not to let it go, because it's also something which is, especially in these times, things have momentum and then they disappear. They fade away. People are going, you hire a director of equality and inclusion, whatever, you promote someone to do that, preferably a person of color, and then you go on with your business as usual. And that is something which we cannot accept. You cannot let this go. And that's why I keep, like, sometimes probably to an annoying level, keep hammering on that subject, that we need to change organizations. And it takes time. I experienced that too. Like our company, we think in this way, but to change it into a more diverse company takes real effort and time. And all the simple ways of doing it in the past, like putting an ad in like a little trade magazine, asking a few friends in the music industry, do you know anyone? That's over. Like if you do that, nothing will change. So you make it it will take way more effort to make real change and make sure that the screens we're on in the Zoom are less male and more colorful.
Mm. And Helen, as executive chair of IMPALA, you don't back away from the fighting of the mergers and complicated matters of other market dominance and so on. But do you also find these softer or close to heart matters equally important? I mean, the point to address diversity and inclusion and climate crisis, is that equally important for the independent community to achieve IMPALA's mission to grow the independent sector?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the composition of the committees, the task forces that work on these issues, they're amongst the most well attended of all IMPALA's committee, probably with the exception of digital. So these are issues which are really close to the heart of the independent sector. And Eva is co-chair of the diversity task force, and she does a great job at keeping the momentum and bringing us all forward. And Roger is a key part of that. And as Roger says, one of the key things that the task force wants to do is to achieve real change. So it's when we actually see change within the people that work within the companies, that's when we'll really be able to see change. But we wanted to measure the work there, so we said that we would report on it every year. And we have, if you look on our website under diversity and inclusion, then you can, in our resource section, you'll find our first annual report. So we continue there. We've been doing a survey. If anybody wants to fill it out, there are details there as well. You can still complete that. It's also very much about understanding the sector and understanding what companies feel they need in order to make change. I was speaking to one of the members yesterday who's got a really interesting project with a local school, and they're going to bring out a record as a result. And a couple of the girls who were involved in the project had come up and said, it's great, thanks very much. I never really understood how to make music. I never understood that I could actually make music myself. So you can really see the impact it has. And one of the comments that the owner of the label made was, next step is to actually bring more diversity into the actual workforce, so not just do outreach, but actually see some change within the employees as well. So it's a really exciting area, and one that people are really enthusiastic about. I think that what's interesting from the training that we have done, which is provided twice a year, free training for all IMPALA members, is that there really is something that can be done by every company, no matter how big or small. You already, by attending the training or even by reading the charter that's on our website, you start to have a reflection and a process of how you position yourself, what you support, what you say on your social media, etc., that can already send a message that the sector about how the sector is inclusive and diverse. And that's how I think we will see change. And sustainability. You mentioned that as well. That's obviously really important. I think most sectors are activating in this, and for the independence, it was again, really, really important. It was led by one of our members, K7, Horst Weidenmuller is the chair there, and it's really hands-on, really practical. We're building a carbon calculator, which will be free to all members, so that they can actually measure what they do now and what kind of changes they can make in order to reduce their carbon. And we're looking at different standards in different parts of the sector, for what bits of the chain are we responsible for and what parts we're not responsible for. So that's all a process that's going on now. So, and that's, I think that's all really linked to the sector. It's all linked to our members being punk, and their attitude in a way of thinking, to be responsible, to be free, and to create change, to foster and to change, to challenge the status quo, because the status quo sometimes is not good enough.
Yeah, indeed. And bringing people together, and the trade associations and the European associations and the international associations, is also about communicating the weird industry to the decision makers, and also to stay on top of the new regulations, to educate us as an industry in order to become active and on the right matters. But what is more difficult, explaining EU politics to indies or explaining the music industry to EU politicians?
Yeah, well, they're both difficult, but I think that there is a narrative that can be that you can weave in when you're talking to politicians. It's very much about that they understand very simply the dynamics of the music sector, and that most of the companies who are producing 80% of new releases are actually small and medium or micro enterprises or self-releasing artists. They make up 80% of the music market, and when people understand that, then they can start to see things differently. So that was like a really key argument, and it remains a key argument today when we're talking about copyright, for example. We still see a lot of anti-copyright sentiment, a lot less than before, but when people understand who is making music in Sweden today, who are releasing, who are finding, who are working and nurturing the next Swedish artists, who are looking for the new diverse talent, and the companies that work there, those are the ones that politicians relate to, that they can understand, and they can see that those companies and those artists make a massive economic and cultural and social impact locally. So,
yeah.
And in the rest of Europe. So it's about, okay, seeing that this is a sector which is creating jobs which don't go anywhere. These are jobs, and these are identities that Europe can lead with, can be proud of. So a lot of the narrative is really about making people feel good about what music in Europe is about today, and imagining they have a role to play in making Europe the best place to run a creative business, making the best place in the world to be an artist. We want them to feel inspired, and I guess it's the same with members. We want them to feel inspired that they can actually achieve change. Look at the copyright directive. Who would have thought a few years ago that we would be able to achieve that level of change against the massive pressure that was created by those who run platforms, or those who wanted to keep as much freedom for digital service as possible. So when you see, when members see that they're able to implement change, and they have some power and they have some influence by doing simply what they do, then I think that's inspiring as well. And because I think IMPALA also takes the lead on issues like diversity and inclusion, like sustainability, that some other industry bodies maybe deal with in a slightly different way, or maybe they're more slow. And I feel that that's really important, because then you're talking about a sector which is a leader, and when you're a leader, you want to do more. You want to stand up. You want to be part of that process, and I think that's one of the reasons why companies like Epitaph helped to set up IMPALA, and it's one of the reasons why we also have the worldwide network with Noemí running that, because then we see the same exercise and all the interactions and exchanges that occur not just in Europe but globally, and then you have something really exciting as well.
And in 2012, IMPALA and WIN, Noemí, you announced a global independent standard, a 10-point manifesto representing the collective position of the global independent sector. And in July 2014, almost 2,000 independent labels signed the Fair Digital Deals Declaration. I don't know how many have signed today, I'm sure you do, but that was a commitment from the independent sector to treat their artists fairly in agreements relating to the digital exploitation and milestone achievements. And now, Noemí, tell me about the 15 years perspective of WIN and where you're going now, and the international perspective of what we just discussed from bringing people together.
Yes, so Roger was talking about how much things have changed in the technology that we use, for example, but actually the principles have not changed that much. And I took another look at the Global Independent Standard recently as part of the 15 defining moments that we promoted to celebrate WIN's 15th anniversary. And it was gratifying to see that all the points still stand today. To support the freedom of creators, to treat artists as partners, to promote transparency in the digital music market, to oppose consolidation, confront market abuse, and so on. And we even we have delivered a tangible solution to one of the points that we had there, the one about creating a worldwide sound recording database. RDX, for example, the Repertoire Data Exchange, operates as a kind of decentralized database, allowing record companies to submit repertoire metadata to multiple collecting societies at once and correct errors and double claims and so on. So it was really good to see that all these points, all these principles that were valid 10 years ago are still valid today. And the same for the Fair Digital Deals Declaration. Independents were the first ones to commit to sharing the benefits of dealing with digital services fairly and clearly with artists, including compensations that cannot be attributed to specific recordings or performances. And the declaration is still relevant and keeps to be cited by IMPALA, AIM, and other associations as an example of best practice, including, for example, the recent inquiry on the economics of streaming in the UK. So yeah, and then I don't know about the 15 years. I think what WIN does, we just summarize it. No, we support, connect, and develop associations, independent music creator associations worldwide. And that's what we keep doing. Providing support means creating and sharing resources, for example, all the work that IMPALA does that we can then promote in other parts of the world. And connecting people means facilitating spaces for the discussion of all these issues that affect us all, and then try to come up with solutions. And then in developing new associations, what we try to do is create or help independent labels in territories where there is no association yet, like some countries in Latin America or Asia, Africa, and so on, to have associations like some in their own countries to help us be stronger, to help structure the different markets, and then join WIN and be part of this community.
And are there regional organizations similar to IMPALA in other parts of the world?
So no, because IMPALA is pretty unique. The situation in Europe is special because of the existence of a single market, a common trade policy, and a supranational law that harmonizes national laws in areas like copyright. Other regions in the world may share the same language, like most of Latin America, for example, or a similar heritage, or have close commercial relations. But supranational organizations like Mercosur or the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or the African Union, they don't come even close to what the European Union is and does in Europe. So it really doesn't translate, but still work at the regional level is very important because, as I was saying, contributes to this development of the sector and fosters the structuring of the music industry and the professionalization of these of smaller companies in those markets. So we coordinate a couple of regional groups at WIN. 2 years ago, we launched the Latin network. And recently we have started the Asia Pacific Alliance. And these are working groups. So it's not the same as IMPALA. They're not organizations. It's just groups that we promote. That combine representatives from existing WIN associations in those regions and individuals from territories without one. And they meet periodically to exchange knowledge and generate strategies and also help us promote associativity and build capacity locally. In Latin America, this has already started to deliver amazing results, like the launch of the Latin American Observatory for Independent Music, which is about to publish the first results, mapping 11 music markets in Latin America. And this, for example, can be a very useful tool for a Swedish artist or label that wants to build a presence in that region, so that they can find more information about, like Roger was saying as well, no? Like you need to know the markets where you want to be. And yeah, I think
Helen is posting important links in the chat, but we will make sure when we publish this video after that we share the links to your websites, because on WIN websites you can find this information that you talk about, and also on IMPALA's website. Yes, but we only have 5 minutes left, and the copyright directive and the implementation of it nationally, I think Sweden is worst in class. Is that right, Helen? We have not implemented it yet. Holland, are you okay, or Spain?
Holland is really good. They were the first, and they did a great job, you know, sticking to the text of the directive to achieve maximum harmonization. Sweden has not yet implemented, but you know, you are not alone. Not even half the member states have implemented yet. You know, I think it's a combination of factors. A lot of governments are slowed down with legislation anyway, because they've had other things to think about. Yeah. Most countries are doing a good job and sticking to the text. That's our main message.
Today is the day when
there's nothing, you don't need to feel too embarrassed.
Oh,
okay.
Tell me that we're worse in class, so I can tell the politicians they need to shape up. No, sorry, just joking. No, today is the day in Sweden where the restrictions are pulled back. So we're happy and confused. Yeah. But I think the importance of international collaboration have also been significant under the pandemic, and IMPALA's and other organizations sort of mapping of all the different support around the world. Do we feel that it's internationally back on track soon, or what is your final comments on these?
on COVID, it's so difficult, isn't it, to predict. The last round, the last variant's been mild, so hopefully that will be how things continue. But it's certainly it's difficult to imagine how touring is going to get back to normal. you know, very, very soon, because there are just so many different waves and different views, different countries, and that despite the fact that we are in Europe, you know, it's a mix of competencies. So you have the EU looking after some things, you've got member states looking after others. IMPALA's just adopted a couple of months ago a new proposal to actually try and take a step back to create a new cultural area, which is not even just the EU, but also the broader EEA, also with neighbouring countries, so that we can actually try to create some new impetus, some new energy around touring, to get politicians to understand that, you know, it maybe is possible to create new opportunities if we try to look at things differently and have a new form of pass for the greater European area. So this is what we're looking at now. But in terms of COVID and support of governments, will have to continue to provide support for the creative sectors, particularly those parts of the creative sectors that are very hard hit, and for individuals working in the sector. I don't know what touring's like in going back to normal in Sweden, but even in the continent, back to normal still quite light for now, anyway.
Yeah, it will. It's not so easy to just start again with all the release plans and touring and getting the audience back to the. It's a long journey ahead. We just gathered all the spring releases from our members, and they're actually a new record of the amount of new independent releases from our members. I think that is an encouraging, positive sign. Many of our members have mixed businesses, so they've taken a strong hit from the pandemic, of course, but there are strength and spirit and heart in the independent community. That is my impression. And I want to thank Roger Dorresteijn from Epitaph Records. Thank you so much. Thank you, Noemí Planas from WIN. Thank you, Helen Smith from IMPALA. Take care, stay safe, and speak to you soon.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. Thanks for all you contribute to IMPALA. It's fantastic for your support and the support of SOM all these years. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's a joy.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.